So guys, Bitcoin has just officially broke down below the $109,000 region, and since doing that has spiked a lot of fear into the market. So does this mean it's over for Bitcoin? Are we going to see Bitcoin come down to these $99,000 to $80,000 price targets that we see people discussing? Or are we likely to fall into a situation like described in previous videos where we have seen similar price action to this on Bitcoin in the past? Now personally, I cannot see a world in which it is over for Bitcoin and we are going to go spiraling into a bear market from here, and that this crash is going to continue simply because of the fact that we have the S&P 500 out in new all-time highs. We have the Nasdaq out in new all-time highs, and most importantly for the cryptocurrency market, we have the Dow Jones still out in that all-time high and holding above those levels, all while seeing the Russell break through all retracement levels and pushing higher towards the previous high set back in November of last year. So taking all this into consideration and a tumbling Bitcoin dominance, I definitely don't think it is over for Bitcoin, and we're going to jump into why in today's video. And then after that, we're going to jump into the altcoin market, have a look at how a few of our trades are going, touch on how we are starting to get closer to those entry levels on coins like Ethereum, where we were looking to add more to our position. And in the last 24 hours, we have been edging closer and closer to those levels. We're also going to have a look at the 6 trades I took earlier in the week. There are some clear losers here, and there are some clear winners. So we're going to touch on all of this in today's video. Let's jump into it. So firstly, we'll start with Bitcoin here. And now that we have lost the $109,000 area after seeing a nice bounce and move to the upside, we even cleared above the $112,000 level, which was a clear support and resistance level for quite a while, even marking the high of the ABC correction before the impulsive move up that ended up playing out since May. However, we have now lost that level, plunged down through the $109,000 zone, and we are sitting at roughly $108,000 here for Bitcoin. And if you caught Wednesday's video on the altcoins that I did scale into, I did discuss 2 scenarios, one in which we would bounce at $109,000 and a scenario in which we could go a little bit lower. And the scenario based around the fact that we could go a little bit lower and see another low here for Bitcoin was based on the fact that we have seen the market cycle repeat multiple times. Now, I won't jump into it too deep in this video as I've spoken about it multiple times in the past, but essentially what we discussed was that we did see 2 peaks after an impulsive move to the upside. Bitcoin grinds to the downside and then flushes. We see these impulsive, choppy washing machine style price action before we eventually get the bottom, and last time it came in the triple low fashion before we then pushed up, consolidated, and then broke out. Now if we have a look at how Bitcoin's price is playing out today just on lower time frames, you can see that we did end up having that same similar style double top. We have been grinding to the downside, and now what I believe we are seeing is those impulsive lows where we do see quite impulsive price action like we've seen here on the interest rate news. Big sells and flushes to the downside, and eventually we just grind down until we set a series of lows which ends up flushing a lot of the long liquidity out of the market. Now if we check the liquidation heat map here on a higher time frame, the 2 week, you can see every time Bitcoin's price has dropped to the downside, we have wiped out significant levels of liquidity. Even so, here back on the 26th of August when we've seen that flush, more liquidity was wiped out. And recently, after every flush here, what we've seen is less and less long liquidity get added to the market. And eventually, if price does keep grinding down and they keep this washing machine action up, what we should start to see is a lot of people looking to leverage long eventually get washed out of the market and not look to enter, which is typically what marks the bottom, like how we've seen things play out during February to April of this year, where we did see this washing machine price action before a lot of the liquidity was wiped out of the market, and then they could send price back to the upside. And if we bring the liquidation heat map down to lower time frames here, what you can see is that recently there has just been a little bit of liquidity added and taken out instantly on that crash of Bitcoin. And since we've seen the bounce, there hasn't been much long liquidity added, and you can see that people trying to long this market, especially on Bitcoin, are getting tired and exhausted. Meanwhile, to the upside there sits lots of short liquidation levels, which if price was to reverse quite fast, we would see all of these get taken out. So as we wait for Bitcoin to find its bottom here, whether it wants to go a little bit lower, maybe 105,000, maybe it'll stop here at 107. I think we'll find out in the coming days leading into early September before we do see things eventually reverse and push back to the upside. And if we put the bottoming structure that played out last time on the right side here and Bitcoin's price today, we can see that we have seen similar lows followed by similar impulsive moves to then flush and set new lows. And we have seen things play out quite similar on today's chart. It's just happening a lot faster. And even the way we've seen price move up over the last couple of days back to resistance levels, we did see play out similar in the past. However, it is playing out much faster now. And what we have seen is essentially the flush now, and if we do start to see a double bottom and price reverse on Bitcoin, this could well be the bottom before we see Bitcoin get out. However, it wouldn't surprise me if we do see Bitcoin go a little bit lower, but structurally I can see similarities here, and eventually if we look to what happened on the right here, Bitcoin did get out, consolidate, and then break to the upside. And if we remove all the drawings, you can see it was choppy. There was this series of double bottoms and pullbacks before we eventually pushed out, grinded sideways, and then broke out. And I think if this is how things want to play out for Bitcoin on today's price chart, then it would make sense structurally, as we have seen Bitcoin perform like this in the past. However, one reason I do think Bitcoin will go lower is because we are looking for Ethereum to also fall just a little bit lower, where we can actually add to our bags and actually scale into our Ethereum trade properly, which was this zone we discussed in yesterday's video. And you can see about a 2-minute mark on Thursday's video, we did discuss this level where we would look for Ethereum to pull back and get our entries, and that so far price is moving towards that area. We just haven't found that bottom yet on Ethereum, so it wouldn't surprise me if we do see Bitcoin go for one more push lower, maybe $105,000, which would push ETH down into our price entry area. Another thing I want to have a look at here is that on the higher time frames, what we can see is that this is total 2, which is the entire altcoin market, and we are just teetering at the highs here. And in every example I've seen, like discussed earlier in the video, where we see the Dow Jones at levels like this, where we see the S&P at levels like this, and the Nasdaq at levels well above its all-time high, especially with the altcoin market consolidating at its high that it set back in December. I just haven't seen a time in the past where all of this has just come crashing down before eventually seeing price push to the upside. And then even when we had a look at something like Kronos here, for example, that you can see back in 2021 when it eventually broke out from these lows, surged to the upside, there was this area of consolidation before it then went for that final push, and that after coming off its bear market lows, we have seen quite similar price action, and just like it did back in 2021, it is finding resistance and consolidation at this level. So even on smaller altcoins here that have pumped recently, we are seeing similar signs of consolidation and seeing them play out structurally the same way they did back in 2021, which is typically what you see when the altcoin market gets back to those highs. However, in the past, we have seen the altcoin market break out from these levels, just like we discussed that Ethereum now making it back to its all-time high would most likely encounter resistance at this stage, just like it did back in 2017 all the way up until 2021 when it made it straight back to its all-time high, encountered resistance at this level before then breaking out and going into that final parabolic move. I do believe we still are just in a stage like this right now, even considering the weakness that Bitcoin has shown in the last 24 hours after losing this $109,000 to $110,000 region. Now, if we move into the trades that we took on the channel, you can see that from Wednesday's video, we did scale into 6 altcoins, and some of them have been winners and some of them have been losers. Now, the reason we only scaled in small positions was to see which coins would perform best and which coins wouldn't perform as well. And as you can see, there are some clear losers, like ADA here, for example, which ended up sweeping its support regions, setting new lows, and ultimately stopping us out of the trade. However, there also has been some clear winners, like Solana here, for example, which ended up pushing to the highs, breaking through its range high, before then rejecting when Bitcoin ended up spilling over. And what's most positive about this Solana trade is that it is most likely Solana will never revisit these levels. So these entry prices that we ended up getting earlier in the week, I don't think will ever get retested until the bull market ends up coming to an end. So as far as this trade goes, very happy with the way things are playing out on Sol. And if we could see Bitcoin go a little bit lower, I will end up scaling in a little bit more Solana, most likely at about $197. However, for some of the coins that were clear losers, I am going to most likely avoid these coins moving forward and pay more attention to some of the coins that are holding up better and are clear winners, like Dogecoin here, which has actually surprised me in the strength that it's shown, considering it is a meme coin, but it is performing a lot better than coins like HBAR or ADA, for example, which have broken down and lost very key areas of support here. Now, finally, having a look at the way things are playing out here on XRP, this price action has just been grinding down to the downside in this channel that we discussed earlier in August, and for the majority of August, it has just slowly been bleeding off to the downside. Now, structurally, we are sitting above the top of this channel, but I don't think that really matters. If we do see XRP bounce here, that would be nice. And structurally, what I am looking for XRP to do on higher time frames is at some point sweep the lows here, which would most likely look like a move like this, before then rebounding quite quick, consolidating in this region before then breaking to the upside. And the longer I see XRP perform in this structure, it does remind me a lot of how it played out back here during May and June, where it did just grind to the downside before having that one flush, V bottoming, consolidating for a little bit, and then breaking to the upside. So as far as things go for XRP on shorter time frames, that is how I am looking for things to play out. One more flush wouldn't surprise me, and then V bottoming straight from there, consolidating, and then moving to the upside is how I am looking for XRP to perform in the short term. And I think September will be a great month for XRP, along with a lot of these other altcoins. We are just in that final shakeout stage now, but I'll be looking at how things play out over Bitcoin leading into the start of September here to give us more direction on how things are likely to play out for the cryptocurrency market. So guys, I hope you're well. This type of price action can be quite chaotic, but typically the way I've seen these play out in the past, like the one that played out during March earlier this year, is just a very chaotic time for crypto, and you don't really know when the low is in until you see price bounce and then structure start to develop, which does look like Bitcoin would want to break to the upside. And so far in this move down here for Bitcoin, we just haven't seen that yet. Getting above 112,000 was the closest we've seen to price actually breaking to the upside, but as soon as that did happen, we did see Bitcoin just lose that level instantly and break down. And now what we really want to see play out here for Bitcoin is a structure that we can recognize that usually points to a bottom, like we did see during this period discussed earlier in the video. And that if we could see that play out and Ethereum give us those lows that we're looking for and simply just flush this range, then I would feel quite confident moving forward and adding to a lot of the positions that I took on Wednesday. So as we move through this, guys, try not to be too stressed. It is pretty chaotic, and the washing machine style price action can be quite unnerving at times. However, considering how late we are into this cycle, it is most likely that this is going to wrap up quite fast, and that in a week's time we could simply have found our bottom by then and then be consolidating back in this $117,000 level before Bitcoin will be looking to move higher. So just trying not to get caught up in the moment here. We have seen a few news events like China banning Bitcoin, which has typically marked lows in the past, especially back in 2021. But in the short term, I think it's about getting into September, where there are a lot of bullish narratives on the horizon, which is just what I think this altcoin market needs before we can see it break out, set new highs, and take all of our coins with it. So guys, until the next video, have a good weekend. If you enjoyed this update video, feel free to leave a like down below. If you're new here, please subscribe. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them down below in the comment section. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next one.